a mom come to me one time and their child had questions. This particular child had questions about sex and birth control. And mom didn't want to answer any of the questions. And I was like, well, mom, where did you, hear all this stuff about? And she was like, the streets. And I was like, oh, the streets? That's where you heard it? I was like, but was that information helpful? Like, did you still need more? And she said the information wasn't helpful. She got it kind of late. And so I was like, well, would you rather your daughter hear that information from the streets or from you? Even if you don't have all the information, you can reach out to a medical provider or check the internet to be able to give you better information to answer her questions. But if you turn your daughter away now, like as she gets older, she's going to continue to turn to other people for that information. And you're going to want to have that same relationship with her. But when she asked you for that relationship, you weren't willing to give it to her.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. My name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Today, I get an opportunity to reconnect with a colleague of mine who we met in the agency life, and it's super exciting to have her on. Not only just like to reminisce, but also to talk about the great things that she's doing within the mental health space. She's a colleague that I thoroughly admire, and I appreciate her approach to the way that she tends to the needs of her clients. But before we dive right in, I need you to hit that subscription button below. That way you can stay up to date on newly released content on a regular basis. But I do want to introduce you guys to my amazing guest, Angela Paggett. Angela, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm ready for this nappy nap. So after we're done with this makeup is coming off, and I'm just gonna go crawl into bed before my next meeting. So yeah.
Sounds good to me. Sounds like the perfect time.
Absolutely. You have a training that you do talking about self-care for clinicians. And so it's very interesting. How has it been taking care of yourself as of lately while you're doing private practice, as well as engaging in community mental health?
So lately, since I've transitioned out of traditional community mental health that I've been doing, I actually take 2 days off a week. So I'm off on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I use those days to go. I go to the chiropractor and I go to therapy. And I also just take it easy. Sometimes I'll do notes. But it's really my day to just take it easy and take a breather. Last year I was ripping and running, working 2 jobs, and it became really stressful. And so this year I decided to take a different approach and really give a lot more time to myself. And so I take 2 days a week.
Love it, love it, love it. It's funny because I was talking to somebody earlier this morning, and I was telling them that if you have any therapist friends, it's more than likely they're working more than one job. Or if they are at a particular setting, they're probably seeing a buttload of clients, so to speak. And so I appreciated your training because you were focusing on the wellness and the well-being of the practitioner. Because obviously we keep telling clients, you can't pour from an empty cup, you can't pour for the empty cup, but who heals the healer, so to speak.
Exactly.
And so can we dive into the ways that what inspired you to do that? What inspired you to take that approach to focus on the wellness of the practitioner?
Actually, it was the year before last, when we had a huge transition at the agency I was at, and a lot of the younger practitioners just felt like they didn't have any work-life balance. And I don't believe in not having a work-life balance. There has to be a time for work, and there has to be a time for you to have your own life. Especially like you said, we're healers. Who's going to work on healing us? When we take on so much energy that's not our own, and sometimes we don't know how to release it, and so we'll stay up late at night doing notes and being all focused on how can I help my client? How can I help my client? It's but how can you help yourself? You can't help yourself if you don't help you can't help your client if you don't help yourself. And so I'm a really stickler for, by the time 7:30 hits, it's no more notes being done. It's no more client focus. And so I feel like I wanted to share that with other therapists, just because if if I'm seeing them every week and they're struggling to be able to take care of themselves, I'm wondering, how much of that is spilling over into your clients. And I also noticed that last year I was that therapist who kind of like took more time to give more to my clients than to myself. And my clients started to notice, like, I got sick and they would be like, oh, like, why didn't you take off more days? And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I got to be at work. But in reality, I really did need to take care of myself because that stress started to kind of pile up. And so it's really important. And I stress that a lot to other therapists, that you really do have to take time for yourself because your clients are going to be there next week, especially if you're doing a good job. They're going to come back. They're going to keep coming back. But are you going to be able to be there to help them? And I never want to walk away or step away from clients because I'm not in my best. I'm not doing my best. I would rather walk away from them knowing that I gave my best and that they decided that, it was time for them to move on.
Oh, I love how beautifully articulated that was. Simply because it's a reminder that your clients are going to be there, and you have to trust the relationship that you've built over
Mm-hmm.
time with that particular client or those sets of clients as well. And understand that the work that you've been doing thus far, it's not the end. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just like this phase in the season of your life, like you're not the end all be all for your clients, and your clients' lives will not like fall to the wayside just because you're taking time to tend to your own self.
Yes, very true.
Absolutely. I like to parallel that to like the parent-child relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so you do a lot of work, especially when it comes to like depression and anxiety amongst Black women and like Black teens and whatnot. And so how have you been able to take what it is that you do for Black clinicians and kind of redirect that to the way that you approach the parent-child dynamic for Black families?
I think the most important part I feel is the communication piece. And just in the simple fact that I think parents like to skip over that middle school, beginning of high school stage of having conversations with their child, but then all of a sudden they want to pop in at the end. And I encourage parents to you need to follow your child all the way through that process. Like being interested in whatever is going on and answering questions during that time. I had a mom come to me one time and their child had questions. This particular child had questions about sex and birth control. And mom didn't want to answer any of the questions. And I was like, well, mom, where did you, hear all this stuff about? And she was like, the streets. And I was like, oh, the streets? That's where you heard it? I was like, but was that information helpful? Like, did you still need more? And she said the information wasn't helpful. She got it kind of late. And so I was like, well, would you rather your daughter hear that information from the streets or from you? Even if you don't have all the information, you can reach out to a medical provider or check the internet to be able to give you better information to answer her questions. But if you turn your daughter away now, like as she gets older, she's going to continue to turn to other people for that information. And you're going to want to have that same relationship with her. But when she asks you for that relationship, you weren't willing to give it to her. Um, and so I really encourage parents to have those conversations with their kids, even if it's a tough conversation. We can have that conversation in session. You can find another mediator, whether that's another family member or someone who, like is a family friend who can have that conversation in between you. But genuinely focusing on having those conversations with your kids. So as they get older, they feel comfortable asking you those questions, even if it makes you uncomfortable. You can tell your child that, like, this is making me uncomfortable. Like, I don't know how to answer this. Like, I don't know if I'm the best person, but we can learn about it together. And the one good thing I love about some of these conversations is that the media is actually providing a lot of they're providing a lot of material, such things like Big Mouth, or even when it comes to like depression and anxiety, you have 13 Reasons Why. And there are a lot of different shows that you can watch along with your kids at the same time. So you can have conversations with them about around what they're experiencing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like something they're experiencing internally, but they can talk about it through the TV show and have that conversation with you. So even if because some parents suspect some things are going on with their kids, but they don't know how to say it or point it out. But if you watch things like Jenny in Georgia or something like that, you can have that conversation with the kid, like, have you ever experienced this or know of someone who's experienced this? So it makes it easier to have that conversation on a level that both parent and child can understand.
Hey, lovely. Shout out to you because I know mental and emotional wellness is important to you. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But lean in really quickly because I know sometimes it's really hard to create a plan and actually sticking to it. So let's take your mental health to another level. Ever wonder what keeps you from fully executing? Ever wonder how you can build the confidence for decision making? Well, guess what? You're not alone and I'm here to help. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com for your free mental health plan. It'll give you practical strategies for addressing your current mental health needs. But first, you got to tap in. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com to receive your free mental health action plan today. Do it right now. mentalhealthgoals.com. See you soon. Oh, I love all of that, right? Because I think oftentimes a lot of parents are afraid to take the collaborative approach because they fear that the child will lose respect for them or start to view them in a different persona. And so it's just like, how do I maintain, not necessarily like this hierarchy, but how do I maintain respect as I am like journeying through this time with my teen or with my child. And that's so important. And even then, that whole dynamic, it requires a lot of like self-confidence and challenging insecurity as well. And so like, how do you help parents navigate the insecurity that may come up with the lack of knowledge, lack of self-awareness, lack of experience, or maybe even like those times where the parent starts to challenge the way that they were raised as well? How do you help Black parents walk through that?
I generally try to have a separate conversation with parents, separating them from the teen and just having a conversation about like what they experience and how they would like that to be different with their child. Because a lot of times parents do feel like their parents might have did it differently or did it, I want to say incorrectly, but they weren't it wasn't the most favorable approach. And so I just talk to parents, like, how would you have wanted this conversation to happen with your kid? Or and what kind of relationship do you want with your child in the future? Do you want one that's communicative? But also I refer to children as tiny people. They're not any different from us. They have the same feelings and emotions and expressions as we do. They just have a harder time exploring a lot of those things. And so I kind of put it back on the parent is like, if you're having a hard time expressing or experiencing this, think about how your child is having also a hard time expressing or experiencing this, and think about some of the ways that you kind of dealt with that. And a lot of times parents will be like, oh, I dealt with this in the same way my child did. And now I'm seeing that reflected back at me. And so I want to do something a little different. So having that conversation. But one trick I always also use is for clients and parents who have trouble talking, I like to use a safe word. So kids have the space to be able to say like, hey, listen, I'm overwhelmed at this point and I'm not ready to talk. But then parents can check in after the safe word is used, and say, like, are you ready to talk now? So that gives the parent and child the space to say like, I'm not ready yet, but I will be ready. So then they can give a time frame of when they might be ready. And so the parent can kind of address the situation at that point. So then it gives each person the time and space to kind of come together with their thoughts, because sometimes we just want to bum rush them and kind of fix it. And then the child and parent like, no, you bum rushed it. And now the situation has gotten out of hand. It's turned into an argument, or the case may be, and now someone's on punishment for no reason. It's like, well, if we slow it down and we don't come from a place of anger, but a place of understanding, now you understand where each person is coming from and you can actually work towards a solution.
I love that because, like you mentioned, oftentimes in the midst of our discomfort, we're just trying to hurry up and fix it. We're trying to get to the bottom of this thing. Let's hurry up and problem solve. However, we miss so much of the details. We miss so much of the nonverbals or like those in between messaging by bypassing or rushing the process. And also, too, what I heard you say was, let's normalize the human experience. If my child is dealing with this, there's a possibility that like I probably felt the same way, and maybe I can utilize these previous experiences to empathize with my child as well. A lot of those connection building in that particular moment.
Yes. Yes, I definitely agree. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, especially with teens, right? They're trying to figure out not only who they are, but they're also trying to learn how to effectively communicate their needs, identify their needs, communicate their needs, and advocate for their needs. And so,
Yes.
how do you help your teen clients walk through the process of personalizing their own healing journey?
Well, we start with kind of really combing through like what is really the issue, like what brought you to therapy. And then from there, it's kind of like we need to be able to define those emotions. So I typically go through my clients with what I like to call the emotion mood board. And so we take the feelings wheel and have them pick out 5 emotions and draw a corresponding coping skill that they can use. So then that kind of gets you to the point, okay, well, I know I deal with depression and I know I like to listen to music while I deal with my depression. Okay, so now we know music and depression go together. So now you can communicate that, like, okay, I spend a lot of time listening to music, which means I'm probably in a depressed state. But what happens when you come out of that? Like, what does that look like when you're not in that space? And so getting the teens to recognize the emotions first before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty of everything. And then we kind of throw off some scenarios. What are some scenarios in which your depression has affected you, whether that's school, with friends, with family, and then kind of talk through how we can rearrange those scenarios or reframe them to make the teen feel more comfortable in that space. And so sometimes I like to role play. So either I role play with my clients and they play themselves or they play another person, or I act as both people in the role play and allow the client to see what that difference could look like if they were to try something different. And so that typically gets my clients talking more, but I also just like to have genuine conversations with my clients. So if we talked about something heavy in the beginning, then we're going to switch to talking about movies or TV shows or books or something just to collaborate with them on a genuine human level about like what are your genuine experiences, so my client feels as though this relationship is not just I'm not someone trying to get you to feel differently or do something differently, but I genuinely want to know who you are as a person, what your interests are, what your goals are, and so we can work towards getting there.
Hey y'all, it's Sierra. Make sure you head over to shoplegacysbks.com to check out the latest gear. As always, we have the classic therapy is dope crew neck as well as tees. So head over to cop your crew neck today. It comes in heather navy, that cardinal red, as well as that beautiful gold that we love to see. So head over to purchase yours, not only for yourself, but also for a friend as well. And we are offering free shipping right now. So head over to shoplegacysbks.com to cop all of your therapy's dope gear and check out all the other additional merch as well. Ooh, I love that because it's a reminder that they're not only are they not alone, but it shows them that there are other people that they can look to for emotional support. And that there's other places where they can form like emotional and psychological safety. When you were talking about that entire process previously before, and excuse me, there was just so many like nuggets and gems that you're dropping, and I'm trying to keep up with it. So y'all, please make sure that y'all are following my dog Angela because she is on it. But I love the process of pre, during, and post, right? You're getting both the client and the parent to acknowledge what is happening prior to, what is happening during, and what can they do afterwards in that particular moment. And it also sounds like you're encouraging them to develop their power of choice. Like I always tell clients, what are your options and what do you think would be ideal for this particular moment? Yeah. And so like when you were saying like that pre and then that post, I thought about how oftentimes we're utilizing like the body scanning or like the progressive muscle relaxation where you're like clenching the bodies super tight so you can know what that tension feels like in the body, and then you're releasing afterwards and you're analyzing what that actually looks like. So I was like, oh girl, you're like emotionally progressive muscling relaxating people.
Yes.
Like that's really dope. Yeah.
I love it. I love working with teens. They're just it's nice to get them at the beginning because they're at the beginning of the starting process of wanting to make a change. College students have the most change. I feel like they have the most space for change. But if you start as a teen, I feel like it makes it easier as you go through those late teens and early 20s to actually move through that change as well and be confident about it.
I agree. I enjoy my young adults. It depends on the teen. And when I say it depends on the teen, it depends on how much autonomy their parents are giving them.
Yes.
And so obviously with working with minors, you really have no choice but to deal with the parent.
That's really true.
And that's why I think your expertise and what you do is so important because you incorporate or at least encourage the parent to think about how they can reinforce what they're learning in session and outside of session.
Yeah. And I always give teens a choice to have parents in session or not to have parents in session. And if parents need to be invited to session, I always have that conversation with the teen about what do you want to discuss in this session and who do you want to be the person verbalizing this in the session. So because sometimes teens will be like, you know what, I can handle it, I just need you to be there for emotional support. And the other times like, well, can you handle it? And I'll just interject. And it just depends on how comfortable and confident they feel about talking to their parent. But I always ask the question beforehand before I invite parent into session, and or if I have the team step out and then have parent into session, I always want to give that choice because there's always a choice in these kind of situations and you want them to feel the most comfortable.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that, highlighting and reminding them that there is always a choice. Even when you feel like your back is against the wall, there's always a degree of choice. I know you identified or at least said that teens or children, they're just many human beings, they're many adults. Are there any ways that you tailor the way that you approach psychoeducation, especially when you're talking to teens about depression and anxiety?
No, I don't think I kind of tailor it any differently. Um I kind of go based off what they're experiencing. Because we all experience depression and anxiety a little bit differently. So I kind of try to have them to identify what those signifiers might be for them, and then kind of try to explain that, especially if they have certain situations that they can identify. Then I'll kind of go through that psychoeducation piece. So like if you're having those racing thoughts, it might just I feel like my metaphors come up based off the person because sometimes my metaphors are the same and sometimes they're different. If we talked about a previous TV show or something, I would like to incorporate that or anything that I think that the team might relate to because I watch a lot of movies and I watch a lot of TV shows that have teens in them. So I'll bring up characters and different things like that. Like I know I haven't used Jenny and Georgia in any of my sessions, but I have used 13 Reasons Why. One of my clients like watched the whole series of 13 Reasons Why, and so had I. And so we used that as a great precursor for talking about their depression and how they saw the characters differently and how they were similar to some of the characters as well. So that was a really great way to kind of talk about that with that particular client. But I also like to use games. Jenga's a great game. I love me a game of Uno as well. Games are a great way just to get teens doing something else so that they can focus on having the conversation. And so I'll typically use that as just a way to kind of get their mind off of like focusing on the words, but you're focused on the game, so the words just kind of flow out a little bit easier.
I agree. I really love incorporating play components or maybe even like going on walks and things of that nature. There was a one client that just really wasn't talking. Like she dealt with like severe panic disorder and she just like it just was like me pulling teeth. But in session, what I would do was I would pull up the YouTube channel and we would do like the walking exercises while talking in the office. And she just thoroughly enjoyed it over time because she was too busy trying to keep balance while talking. And I'm like, yes, got you.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, I've actually done my makeup with my client. We sat down and I had our makeup together, and we did our makeup during the session, and we just talked. So it also worked out. So yeah, it sometimes you have to just go to the drawing board and be like, listen, what can I pull out my hat? Like, um, and I think just honestly just being one thing I with other therapists about recently was just being present with clients, because sometimes when it comes to teens, it's literally just about being present and being quiet sometimes, because if you start the conversation, they might just run with it. You don't have to say anything. I'm just sitting there like, okay, and keep telling me more. And
Yeah.
so they're just once you build that rapport, it's kind of like you don't really have to try as hard. So I will say that working with teens, it really is about that rapport building in the beginning. And you want to take it as slow and or fast as possible as your client is willing to go with you.
Absolutely. Meeting the client where they're at. And then also, like you mentioned, just listening. I think oftentimes a lot of teens feel as though they don't have a voice. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on, what family you come from, children are to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when they come to a therapy session, they're like, oh, you actually value what I got to say? Like, you
Yes.
actually want to hear what I have to say without interrupting me? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
bet. Let's go. And so, please, if you are a parent of a teen, like, don't allow the therapy session to be the only place where your teen feels heard. Please try to like model that or at least recreate that in some way, shape, form, or fashion. One thing that I absolutely love this entire time that you mentioned was like incorporating TV shows and like music videos or maybe even any other material as well. And that falls into the line of bibliotherapy. And so for any individual who doesn't know what bibliotherapy is, it started off by utilizing books, self-help books, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
stories or poems and things of that nature, fables, as ways for individuals to learn about themselves in relation to either the theme or the character. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we're talking about utilizing movies, all movies are just like scripts displayed by the actor. And so
Right.
oftentimes a lot of people or a lot of clients can see themselves in a particular character because of the way that it was written. And so a client of mine, she's currently watching This Is Us. And you already know, like that show is just the bomb.com. It was so well written. So well written. And it's just she would say, it's like they're saying my life, they're showcasing my life. And I'm like, that's great. I'm glad that you're experiencing that because it helps you to normalize your own personal experience. Even
Yes.
though these characters are make believe, these are real life human experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
so please don't feel alone in your situation. Please don't feel as though you're isolated or by yourself in this particular scenario. So I'm pretty sure even as with 13 Reasons Why, having those reference points helps the client see things come alive for them a lot more.
Yes. Yes, very much so. Very much so. And it's great because, sometimes, like you said, clients don't necessarily feel like they have a voice, but being able to share, a TV show or a movie kind of gives them that voice to be able to say, like, that's how I felt, or that's how I experienced this. And now you can go back and use that as a reference. And I had to remind myself that everything that your client shares with you or wants you to watch, you don't have to watch. You can just reference it, because you might end up reading and or watching so many things that you probably don't care about. But at the end of the day, like, it's a great tool to be able to allow them to share their voice through someone else's voice. And you can also possibly get your client to start creating in that same sense, because they saw something, but like maybe they have a passion for writing or drawing or something. And, watching that TV show is a great inspiration. It's like, well, now that can become one of your coping skills. You saw this show and I heard you say you want to write. So why don't you write something similar? Write your own story or write your story from someone else's perspective, or someone else's outside of your perspective, so that you can share that someday with someone else and they will be able to find inspiration from the works that you created.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Angela, can you please let the people know a little bit more about like your journals and all the other amazing things that you have going on?
Yeah, so currently I'm working in private practice and I created a journal series just for the simple fact that I love writing, I love creating. And I felt that so many other people love writing and creating. And during the pandemic, there were so many times that I saw that people were just trying to find ways to kind of, I wouldn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, but take their lives into their own hands. And I felt that creating journal was a great way to start writing those things down, those ideas, whether creative or not, or learning, for those people who want to draw, especially. And I create them for men and women because I feel like one thing about being a therapist is that you notice there are not a lot of men who come to therapy. But I wanted to open and create space for everyone to feel like they have a voice and they can express that in whichever way they choose. And so that's kind of where my journals came from.
Ooh, love it. Oh my goodness, y'all. Please make sure that you're tapping in with Angela Paggett. Angela, can you let the people know where they can find you and where they can keep up with all the amazing things that you do?
You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is at the Therapy Goddess. You can also find me on Psychology Today. That's Angela Paggett. That's Paggett. And I am an associate marriage and family therapist, soon to be fully licensed in a state near you, mainly Georgia, because that's where I'm licensed.
Girl, if this counseling compact don't hurry up, eventually you will be licensed in other places
Oh,
too.
I cannot wait till the counseling compact comes. We're the last to be get a counseling compact, and when it comes, I'm just gonna spread my wings wherever I can.
Listen, because applying for multiple licenses in different places is
Ooh,
expensive.
expensive,
Okay.
expensive. The test was already hard the first time. I'm not trying to take it nowhere else.
My Lord. And like because I'm licensed in the state of Maryland, and so I didn't have to take a test, but I take that back. I had to take a test based upon their laws for
Okay.
being a professional. But to like pay for the licensing process, I'm like, to do that for multiple states, that's a lot. But that's
It
neither
is a
here nor
lot.
there. Amen. If you're in Maryland, hit me up so I can recoup my coins. All right.
I love it.
But Angela, as you know, that this podcast is called the Legacy Speaks podcast. And one question that I ask all of my guests before they head out is, what would you like your legacy to say about you?
That's really interesting question. I think I want my legacy to be that, honestly, I know that we all see each other as the person that, the physical being. But we're not just physical beings. We're mostly soul and everything else is just human experience. And so to remember that even though the day to day might be stressful, at some point you will no longer be here and you will have just been a human experience, and just to live out the human experience, good, bad, indifferent, comfortable, uncomfortable. You're a soul at the end of the day, and so remember that the human experience only lasts for so long. So enjoy it while you're here and be present.
Oh, girl, that's a whole different episode. I'm like, let's go. But Angela, that was just so beautifully said. As always, like I say this all the time, it's definitely a pleasure working with you. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect after this. And so, like she mentioned, you guys, please make sure that you're staying connected with Angela Paggett. You can find her on Psychology Today, and you can reach out to her at the Therapy Goddess. I am really big on sliding in the DMs. Okay. So if you want to work with my dog, please slide in the DMs. Okay. And you can definitely stay connected with all things Legacy Speaks at legacyspks.com or at legacyspks on everything. Once again, my name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. If you thoroughly enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And please share it with a friend, with a coworker, colleague, with your mama, cousin, whoever, anybody who needs some type of mental wellness support. All right. The whole purpose of this podcast is to help you get connected to amazing clinicians of color, specifically Black men and women. So please, please, please stay connected and enjoy the previous episode and the episode after this. All right. So we will keep in touch. And until next time, stay well. Bye.